Okay, from that extensive atan, we're gonna get back to internet governance now. Um, right, so our next session is the internet governance ecosystem. The session is being moderated by Mr. Zmarialai Wafa from ISOC Afghanistan. Um, the speakers, let me call on stage. Mr. Wafa, please come on stage. The speakers, Marilyn, Cade, CEO, mCade ICT Strategies, and my dear friend, Bahir Esmat, who's joined us on WebEx, is the Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement, Middle East and Adjoining Countries in ICANN. We've got Mr. Paul Wilson, Director General of APNIC. And then we will get into an open discussion, and I can then sum it up later on. On to you, Mr. Wafa.
Thank you, Khaled. As Khaled made the announcement, the session is mainly about the IG ecosystem. So we have our speakers. I would like to start with a question like most of us has, like what does the internet governance mean actually? What do you mean by internet governance? I'll briefly speak about this a little bit. There is no one entity that has true accountability for the governance of internet all over the world. There's no one entity we can say. The current governance model is called multi-stakeholder, and that's like the model is from based on the including organic mix of the public, private sector, entities, regional, national, and international levels. So here we have various entities getting involved in this. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Is this okay? Hello? If it's not working, get me another mic. Yeah. Hello? Yeah, this is much better. I'll turn this off. In the 40 years since the inception, a number of the organization working groups, including representatives from academia, government, civil society, engineers, end users, and industry experts, have played a role in managing various functions that make up the internet. But mainly we can say there are like two things which are very in focus in terms of internet governance. One is the governance of internet, how the internet works. This aspect is mainly about the technical infrastructure behind systems, approving the introduction of new top-level domains and oversight of the domain name system. The second part is how internet is used, which is talking about the contents and information shared using internet. So with this, I would like to start with our speakers in today's session. I'll start with Marilyn Cade. You have 10 minutes, Marilyn. I'm sorry for the very short time. Yeah, please.
Well, perhaps I'll take at least 30 seconds to say how impressed I am by the opportunity and the welcome that has been given to me to join all of you at the inaugural IGF in Afghanistan. And I will just say, having served as the chief catalyst for the launch of the IGF USA in 2009, that frankly, your inaugural event has inspired me to do better. So look forward, our event is in July. Look forward to see whether I can find Native American dancers who can do as good a job as your cultural team did. Let me go on with my comments. I'm going to sort of use my PowerPoint as cue cards, and I will ask, please, for assistance in changing the page. Let's go to the next page. What I hope to do today is to help to decode internet governance. What is the internet? What is internet governance? Who's in charge of the internet? What's the internet governance ecosystem? and what are some of the key issues under debate in 2017 and moving forward. We've heard excellent comments so far today, so let me open with a parable. Internet governance is, in fact, very, very difficult to break apart and to understand. There's a wonderful parable. There are many versions of it, but I'll use an Indian version. There was a very rich Maharaja in a remote village in India. And he was becoming very, very frustrated because every morning at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, he was awakened by the chattering and the yelling from his 9 advisors, all of whom happened to be blind, arguing about what is an elephant? What does an elephant look like? What does an elephant feel like? What does an elephant do? Let me try this. Does this work? Does this work? Okay. The Maharaja story, the parable of the wise men and the elephant. So the Maharaja became very frustrated by the fact he couldn't get sleep, and he called together some young boys from the village, and he assigned them the responsibility of taking the 9 blind wise men out into the jungle and finding an elephant so that they could experience the elephant themselves. And of course, as they were blind, their method of understanding the elephant was by feel. So they surrounded the elephant, they touched the elephant, they talked among themselves, they rushed back to the Maharaja and said, "Sire, sire, we have the answer. We can now understand the elephant, we can explain the elephant." And one said, the elephant is like a wall, because he was touching the body. The other said, no, it's like a snake, because he was touching the trunk. Another said, "You're so silly, it's a rope." He was touching the tail. Another said, "It's a fan and it moves the air," because he was touching the ear. Another said, "No, it's a tree. I touched it. 4 trees growing together." The Maharaja sighed and said, apparently the elephant is whatever part of it you are touching. Internet governance is very much like that. So don't expect to come away from these 2 days with understanding every part of internet governance, but let me see if I can decompose a few parts of it. Go to the next slide. And go to the next one. So the internet at its inception in 1969 looked like that. It was a research network with 4 nodes. Go to the next slide. This slide is the portrayal of internet traffic. It is a software program written by AT&T Labs, and the lights are transmissions that are taking place at a single nanosecond on the internet. So if you go on to the next page, it sometimes helps to think of the internet as a layered approach. When most people use the term internet, what they actually mean is the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure layer, the backbones, the IXPs, the ISPs, the undersea cables, the logical layer, like domain names, IP addresses, root servers, the internet registries, who we'll hear from later today, and the economic and societal layers that get into the laws, policies, regulation, content, information and news, applications, and users. If we understand that there are layers to this complexity of the internet and the social media and the online world, then we can begin to understand how best to govern it or to self-govern it. Let's go to the next page. This slide, and all of my slides will be posted on the website, is just a snapshot of some of the growth that has been happening in the internet. And a couple of examples. One is that in 1998, when ICANN was launched, there were 147 million users on the internet. They came primarily from 9 countries, mostly, of course, as you would expect, the Western Europe and North American countries, and Japan. One of the interesting facts is that one of the countries that was connected to the internet in 1998 from Africa was Ghana. We now are at 3.77 billion users on the internet. We have 3.4 to 5 billion more to go in order to connect just today's world population. So while we're seeing growth, we have a lot of work to do here in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Let me go to the next page. You'll be hearing later in some of the workshops about the Internet of Things and also about wearable devices. If you go to the next page. And then the next page. So and then the next page. One more. There. So this slide is an example of the fact that we need to work together to build the internet governance model. It is not dictated, as you have heard from other speakers, it's not dictated by a government agency. It is built by our work in collaboration with each other and also with the government ministries and agencies. And you'll find the slide very interesting. There's an updated version of it as well that the Diplo Foundation publishes, but it's kind of a useful way to think about the fact that together we can build the best practices as well as think about what laws and regulations are needed. If you go to the next page. The internet and its regulation, governance, management, coordination is on everybody's agenda today. And what you see before you are just some of the logos of the various entities ranging from the United Nations expert agencies, the United Nations General Assembly itself, the World Trade Organization, the G7, the G20. In the middle, you see the logos of some of the technical providers, one ICANN, and also the regional internet registries that we'll be hearing from next. But there are many, many players that are in what we think of as the cooperative area where stakeholders are working together to either develop standards, policies, protocols, codes of conduct, best practices. And it's important to understand that in this model of multi-stakeholder engagement, we need more and more participation, and we need to have informed participation from people who are interested in helping to take the internet more broadly to serve those citizens who aren't yet served and to improve the way it meets the needs of the citizens here in Afghanistan, the businesses here in Afghanistan, the NGOs, civil society, the government agencies, also in your region and your sub-region and around the world. And on the right-hand side are the logos of some of the regional entities. If we go to the next slide. Internet governance policy issues and challenges, as you can see from this slide, is a really long list. I'm not going to go through these, but what I am going to say is anything that affects the internet, either the use of the internet or the way the internet is accessed, is increasingly of interest, not only to business users and to others because they are using this very important communications and information access resource, but it is also important to government agencies who do have to think about how they are delivering e-government services, but also how they're making sure that there is a safe, resilient environment for users and that the risks and threats that are emerging are also thought about, that we are able to deliver the same kind of protections offline and online to the users. We go to the next page. So one of the acronyms that you're hearing is the IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, and that was created at a Heads of State Summit in 2005. You'll see a chart in a couple of minutes that shows you where the 11 global IGFs have been held. In addition to the global IGF, now there are close to 90 plus national and regional IGFs. And of course, our newest is IGF Afghanistan. At the same time that the discussions, which are non-binding and are growing in intensity at the IGF, roughly 2,000 to 2,200 people come together once a year. In the national and regional IGFs, they focus on what the issues are that are local to that country or to that sub-region or to that region. At the same time, there is an ongoing debate led by some governments who are very concerned about whether or not the UN should take over the internet. or whether one of the existing UN agencies should take over the internet. So this concept of enhanced cooperation is a debate led by some governments with others about whether it's a government-to-government conversation and negotiation, or it is to continue the multi-stakeholder interaction and engagement. If you would go to the next slide, and we'll just quickly scan past this. This is the leadership of the IGF itself. I'm going to skip that, go to the next slide. And this is the chart I mentioned, which shows you where the IGFs have been held, the global IGFs have been held. Go to the next slide. Very quickly, sometimes we have an analogy in the United States that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail. And some of the UN agencies themselves need to begin to think about their roles differently. They too need to catch up with new times and to understand that it's not a top-down environment anymore, that it is a distributed environment where citizens, stakeholders, all need to be working with governments. If we are going to address the major problems we have in our world and in our countries, then we have to work together. So a lot of things have begun to emerge in the last 2 to 3 years. The ITU continues to be pressured by certain of its member states to take on a role in the internet. I will be happy to talk about this later, but I will just say, as someone who has spent a lot of my career in working at some of the study groups at the International Telecommunications Union and in attending council meetings. I was appointed by the Secretary General of the ITU to be a participant in the high-level cybersecurity working group, that the ITU has a role to play, but it is not in taking on the role of internet policy or internet coordination. It is working on what it is best at, which is telecommunication standards, spectrum allocation, etc. Other UN agencies also have roles to play. Let me go on to the next slide. But
sorry, Marilyn, can you make it in 2 minutes? Thank you.
One of the issues we face is that there are new players like ICANN, like the IGF in this internet ecosystem. And we have to figure out how to get the existing players to cooperate, coexist, and collaborate with the former players. I might use a telecommunications analogy, which some will be familiar with. As we have introduced competition into the telecom arena, we have often found that the new entrants needed some help in breaking into an established marketplace. If you go to the next slide, and then the next slide. So the last slide that I'm showing you, this is a collision in space. We need to avoid collisions and apply the resources we have in the existing institutions, in the ecosystem, and the new institutions if we are going to fully address the challenges of bringing full access, affordable access, training, skills, jobs, and address the sustainable development goals to the world's citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you. Thank you for explaining the ecosystem and the most important part, the participation, where people should participate in all those dialogues, the IG dialogues. And definitely, I'm sure that you will have your updated slides with the local IGFs 90+1. Afghanistan is also among them now. Thank you. But our next speaker for the session is Bahar Esmat, Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement from Middle East and adjoining countries. But there's a slight request coming from Paul Wilson, if he can get the mic first. But let me ask if Bahar is okay with this. Bahar, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is it okay if I switch to Paul, because I think it's a time difference? I'll give the floor first to Paul, then I'll get back to you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Paul, are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, Paul Wafa, Director General, APNIC. Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I can send video if that through WebEx if that helps as well. Would you like me to do that, or should I just stick to the audio?
Yes, please.
So I don't know if that's useful to have a video feed or whether it might disturb
Yeah.
the feed, but there you are.
Is that okay?
Okay, should I go ahead?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you again so much, and good morning to everyone. It's really an honour to be here to speak with you all at the first Afghan IGF. So I want to congratulate the ISOC Afghanistan chapter in particular, Omar and colleagues for your efforts to organise this event. I'm very sorry that that I can't be here for this the significant first IGF. I hope to be there for the second Afghan IGF, which I see as being organised for next year. I'd also like to say congratulations to all of you in the audience for being here. This is a new and emerging event in Afghanistan, and I really hope that that with your support it will be very, very successful. So I think you know I'm Paul Wilson from APNIC. We're the Asia Pacific Network Information Centre. So we are the regional internet address registry for the Asia Pacific. We allocate IP addresses, that's IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, to networks across the region. And we cover that region from the South Pacific Islands through to Mongolia and across to Afghanistan. We've got over 6,000 members these days. We only have 44 members in Afghanistan, but that's growing these days rapidly, I think. And along with members are our allocations of IP addresses to those networks in Afghanistan. So I'm here to talk about internet governance and the internet ecosystem. And in doing that, I think it's really important to look at the internet itself. What actually is the internet? How does it operate? And this is really important. What has made it so successful as a global infrastructure? Because the success of the internet isn't just about the technology, about what the internet is. It's more about how the internet is, how the internet has been developed and how it's maintained. And there are elements here to the success of the internet which are kind of hidden, which is not to say that they don't require work. I could say that it's like the internet is like the water that comes out of the tap. In many countries, at least, we assume that it's there and it's clean and it's available, even if we have no idea how it got there. So in the same way, there are certain things about the internet that we really take for granted, even more actually in places where the internet's established and where it can be extremely valuable to us, we take it for granted. And so I actually want to talk about those things as a preamble to your discussions on governance, about those things within the internet that we take for granted, and which I'll argue really do need to be preserved by any internet governance framework that exists. So the first thing is, you may know the internet is known as an open network. It was developed in this way through the 70s and 80s as an open platform on all levels. The standards, the software, the intellectual property have been available to anyone who wanted to use those things. Connection was encouraged, initially on a free or not-for-profit basis, but then quickly actually in an open competitive environment that made sure that new players could come in and provide better and cheaper services. The internet actually hasn't involved monopolies or licensing or artificial hurdles that tend to go with those things. Almost in no cases has it had those features. So to put openness in another way, and this is also important, it's the barrier to entry to the internet that's low, and that has always been as low as possible to allow the network to grow, to allow people to join it, to be users, consumers, or publishers of content, to be technology developers, innovators, businesses, enterprise of all types. There's an idea from the Internet Society of permissionless innovation, which expresses how the openness of the internet, that is the low barrier to entry of the internet, has allowed anyone, almost anyone having entered the internet, to do their own thing, to create and innovate without any real restraint. And that's permissionless innovation. Now, back in the early days, the internet was hardly known to governments. Aside from the USA, of course, very few governments actually invested in the internet or really supported it in any real way. But the internet did happen to coincide, not coincidentally though, with a trend towards liberalisation of telecommunications. And that suited the internet very well because in many cases it was possible for internet startups to happen without the traditional impediments, without the licensing and so forth, without needing the permission of governments or authorities. So something about a successful internet ecosystem is definitely this element of liberalisation and permissionless participation. This doesn't mean, and I stress this, it doesn't mean complete deregulation, by the way, because deregulation is needed, but it does mean that regulation should be enabling of the internet, to enable competition and innovation, to enable consumer choice and consumer protection, rather than regulation sort of acting to set up excessive barriers to entry. Now, the second point I wanted to cover is that we take for granted the global nature of the internet. Now, for a new user, it can be kind of miraculous, actually, that you can talk as easily to another continent as you can to your neighbor. But I can tell you it quickly becomes an assumption on today's internet, and one that we really come to completely rely on. We know soon enough that on the internet we can communicate, we can transact, we can access information and applications. We can do all these things on a global scale without needing to know what's actually happening at the other end. We don't need to know the location geographically of that place. And we don't need to know anything about conditions, pricing, regulations, etc., that might be involved with reaching another part of the net. So there's a freedom, there's a uniform connectedness. That's another critical assumption that we all make these days. But the point is that, like the other assumptions, these things don't exactly come for free. They take work, they take governance to maintain these things. At the technical level, for instance, organisations like APNIC work on management of IP addresses specifically to ensure that those addresses are distributed fairly around the world and can be reached globally. The DNS, the domain naming system, which I'm sure you've been speaking about, is something that needs to operate with complete reliability and predictability globally. These are issues of technical coordination and governance, which require coordinated work across a community of organisations, including the RIRs, APNIC is one, but also ICANN and others who you'll hear from. But aside from the technical level, there are some other expectations as well, that at the national and transnational level, the internet can enable a sort of a free, unimpeded global connectivity, the ability to transit information freely and uniformly around the world. And that can be expected even when other barriers exist, for instance, in trade and travel. The internet can be freer than those things. And as I said, governments haven't had much to do with the internet. It's natural that regulations of the internet have come later. But I think what we need to maintain now is the fact that the internet has become reliable and valuable in its current form, in its open form, and needs to be really carefully regulated to really protect that value.
Paul, sorry to interrupt you. Please, 2 minutes. Sum it up.
Okay,
please.
No problem. So the opposite of connectedness is fragmentation of the internet that you may have heard about, the loss of integrity of that single internet, which could be for technical or regulatory reasons. And if fragmentation is allowed, then in many cases it really could be difficult or impossible to reverse. At the policy level, for instance, if we cut populations off from the global internet, or if we impose different or onerous conditions, then those populations can be left out or left behind while others actually leap ahead and enjoy the benefits. So just briefly, there is a third point about the internet that's not to be taken for granted. That's neutrality. Network neutrality is actually a term that was invented out of the internet. It came from the internet because before the internet there were different networks, and the different networks had their own applications. What the internet has enabled is this neutral separation between the internet infrastructure and the applications that run on it. So the neutrality of the internet has actually been a default from day zero. It's lasted a long time as a default, but recently there have been commercial pressures, business models emerging which involve alliances between networks and other providers, which actually erode that neutrality because they might want to, for instance, prioritize traffic or apply different costs for traffic for different services. So businesses may be free to make those arrangements, but there's now a policy question as to whether or not there should be some regulation to enforce a more neutral environment, at least in some cases. Now, all of this is being discussed and has been discussed from the beginning in this multi-stakeholder model. And I'll just mention that multi-stakeholderism is something that's been a feature of the internet in terms of its openness since day one. It's much more a feature of the internet these days in terms of deliberate inclusion of different stakeholders. But multi-stakeholderism has been a feature of the internet, and it was sort of discovered back before the IGF started as something that was critical to internet governance. So what does this mean for the IGF in Afghanistan? Well, the features I've mentioned, the openness, the interconnectedness, the neutrality, the multi-stakeholder aspects of the internet are not only essential to the internet, but they're also not guaranteed. Each of them actually require work to be maintained, and if that work stops, then those essential features get eroded. So that could happen gradually. It could happen in different parts of the network around the world at different times at different rates. But the end result would be, after some years, a network that actually is not recognizable as the same internet. We might call it the internet still, but it would not be the same. And a lot of what we take for granted on the internet would have been lost. So I think the point about IGF is we can't expect everyone, we can't expect internet users or the internet industry, policymakers in general, to necessarily keep all of these things in mind. And so we need to understand why they're important in internet governance. We need to preserve and protect the best of what we have on the internet while it still evolves to serve our societies. So finally, it is great to see this IGF event in Afghanistan. Congratulations again, because it really is a big step in the right direction for any country. And not many countries have IGF structures yet. The idea is to come together to take lessons from each other to ensure that the internet works and grows for the benefit of everyone. So that's what I'd like to share with you at the opening of this session. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to join you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Our last speaker is Esmat, Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement, Middle East and Adjoining Countries from ICANN. Bahar, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much for your patience. You're a gentleman, Habibi. Please, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by congratulating Afghanistan and the internet community in Afghanistan on the launch of the Afghanistan IGF. This is a great step and a significant step in the development of the internet ecosystem in Afghanistan. I'd like to applaud the efforts by many stakeholders actually in Afghanistan, the Ministry of Communications and IT, the Telecom Regulatory Authority, and of course the Internet Society chapter in Afghanistan. I feel privileged that I've been working with some of you over the past few years in many efforts and activities in relation to the internet development in Afghanistan and the internet governance in Afghanistan. So many congratulations on this achievement. I think what you have done is a true multi-stakeholder example of how to develop forums and processes at national level. This is, I think, a model that many countries, at least in this part of the world, can learn from and hopefully follow. I'm Bahar Esmat, by the way. I work for ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. I'm leading the stakeholder engagement efforts at ICANN in Middle East and adjoining countries. This is a region of 26 countries that spans all the way from Afghanistan east to North Africa in the West, including all Arab countries as well as Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan. Very glad to be with you here this morning, and I'm very, very sorry that I couldn't be in Kabul physically in Kabul. But I'll be with you remotely. I do have few slides. I'm not sure whether they are shown on the screen or not, but basically I'm going to talk about ICANN and what ICANN is. So ICANN is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Yes.
You can share your slides through WebEx. Through WebEx.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
All right. Let me try to do that. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't want to waste a lot of time. Yeah, share my screen. Okay.
Yes.
I'm now
Thank
sharing
you.
my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, very good. Thank you. So ICANN was established in 1998 as a not-for-profit corporation working for the maintenance of a single interoperable internet. For anyone to connect to the to type an address into your computer. These addresses are names and numbers, and we oftentimes call them unique identifiers. So ICANN's role is to coordinate these unique identifiers in cooperation with many actors in the internet ecosystem. ICANN also promotes competition and develops policies pertaining to those identifiers. And just to be clear, that ICANN does not get involved in any content-related matters. So we are only responsible for the addresses of the internet, but not the content of any of the internet applications. So more precisely, ICANN coordinates the allocation and assignment of these sets of identifiers, and they are actually three sets of identifiers. Domain names, these are extensions like .af in the case of Afghanistan, or there are also generic domains like .com, .org, and so forth. IP addresses, these are resources managed and coordinated by regional internet registries like APNIC in the case of Asia Pacific. And the protocol parameters, these are the parameters required for any internet application or services to work. We facilitate the coordination and operation of the DNS root server system. This is, if you will, the database of the internet addresses. So we do coordinate the management of this database with the root server operators. And finally, we coordinate the development and implementation of policies pertaining to those identifiers to ensure the secure and stable operation of the system. As an organization, as ICANN organization, our headquarters are in Los Angeles, California. We do have regional hubs in Istanbul for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and in Singapore for Asia Pacific. We do also have engagement centers or engagement offices in a number of cities around the world, as you can see on the screen. but more importantly, the ICANN community. This is what ICANN is about. The organization itself is a small organization, but the community is big. We have community of thousands of individuals and organizations hailing from different regions, countries, stakeholder groups representing governments, intergovernmental organizations, private sector, technical community, academia, civil society and NGOs, as well as the end user community. This community works together through many processes and working groups. They work remotely and physically on developing the policies of the unique identifiers. And once those policies are developed and adopted by the community and approved by the ICANN board, it's then the staff or the organization role to implement those policies.
Bahar, you have 2 minutes, please. Sum it up.
ICANN board. Sure. So ICANN board, this is the decision-making body at ICANN, and it's composed of the various constituencies of ICANN from the different stakeholder groups. One of the key parts of ICANN, as I said, is development of the policies in relation to the unique identifiers. These policies are developed in a bottom-up manner through the participation of the various groups from the different constituencies of ICANN, whether they are technical constituencies, business, government, or end user and civil society constituencies. To participate at ICANN, participation in ICANN is open through either attending the ICANN meeting, whether physically or remotely. I'm including some of the information about the upcoming ICANN meetings, and you can also participate via sending public comments on the different documents, policy documents that are always available for public comments. We do also have a fellowship program to encourage and support participation from developing and least developed economies, and these programs actually bring between 40 to 45 participants at each and every ICANN meeting, and we are happy to see more people coming from Afghanistan through this program. We also have the Next Gen program. This is focusing mainly on students, undergraduate, postgraduate students between 18 and 30 years old to come and participate in ICANN meetings. We also have an online learning platform, the ICANN Learn. This is a platform where it's a free platform where people can enroll in different programs and learn more, not only about ICANN, but about the broader internet governance spectrum. Very quickly about ICANN in the Middle East and adjoining countries, what we've been doing, we've been working on regional strategies for engaging community in ICANN, community from Middle East and adjoining countries. These strategies are developed by the community. So currently we are in the second phase of the regional strategy that will last till 2019. The implementation of this strategy is currently underway. The main pillars of this strategy is to support secure, stable, resilient DNS infrastructure, to promote healthy and competitive domain name marketplace, to raise awareness about ICANN's role in the internet ecosystem, and also to engage with law enforcement and CERT and all other stakeholders in relation to ICANN's role and mandate. Many projects are running in this part of the world. These are just, the headlines of these projects. We'll be happy to talk about them, in detail later on if the opportunity allows. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity and for having me with you in this very special occasion, and congratulations again on the launch of the Afghanistan IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahar. Thank you. Since we're running short, I would like to request if you can have your questions. If you have questions, have them all in writing, and we will pass them on and we'll give it to you later if you have any question in this regard. To sum up the entire session, As Bahar explained, ICANN is only with the names and numbers. Okay, they don't do anything with the contents in regards to contents or something like that. They do have programs, so strong participation is required from all of you. Make sure that you check their website from time to time, apply for their fellowship programs, and do their learning programs. IG is not only with the regulation. We need to have